Lavender Town Mysteries, Missing Frequencies, and Lavender Town Syndrome, LTS. The phenomenon of the Lavender Town tone is a legend that involves a bizarre spate of medical cases and deaths from around the country that have been connected to the Pocket Monsters Pokémon game series. In particular, the first two games of the series, Red and Green. Though the event is largely unheard of due to disclosure laws for companies based in the Kyoto prefecture, there is a large amount of information that has been brought into the open by a number of dedicated individuals, including Seki Uchitada, Issei Mitsutomo, and Saito Haru, to whom this page is dedicated. Thanks also go out to Ando Kajetada for providing images and animated GIFs of the visual phenomena. This analysis will discuss other phenomena that is often confused with the Lavender Town tone, known as White Hand Sprite, Ghost Animation, and Buried Alive model, as well as the semi-related developer tag that was inserted into the game, and how to safely perform these Easter eggs in post-First Wave cartridges. History of the game. The first cases of the Lavender Town tone and associated events were reported a few months after the release of Pocket Monsters Red and Green for the handheld Game Boy video game console. These video games were wildly popular, with children between the ages of 7 and 12, their core demographic, which was no doubt one of the reasons why the Lavender Town tone had the level of severity that it did. In the game, the player takes on the role of a trainer whose task is to capture, tame and train wild creatures called Pocket Monsters for battle. These games, and the two newest additions to the series, Pocket Monsters Gold and Silver, an anime, manga, figures, a collectible card game, and home console games, have resulted in Pocket Monsters becoming a multi-billion-dollar franchise. In one part of the game, the trainer comes to a small, out-of-the-way place called Lavender Town. This town is one of the smallest hamlets in the game, aside from the trainer's own hometown, and possesses very few of the services available to the trainer in every other city in the game. Indeed, the location would be unremarkable were it not for the Pokémon Tower located there. A colossal building that holds the graves of hundreds of deceased Pokémon. It is theorized that because of this location in the game, at least 200 children lost their lives, and many more developed sudden illnesses and afflictions, and this does not consider the vast waves of unreported illnesses or deaths whose cause went unnoticed. History of the Pathology. It was not until spring/summer of 1996 that the cases that would eventually become linked to the Lavender Town tone began to surface. The earliest record of the acknowledgement of the effects of the Lavender Town tone that the author could find came from an internal report made in June 1996 by the company Game Freak Inc., which was then leaked by one of its former employees, Mrs. Sato Haru. In it, an employee gives a list of names, dates, and symptoms, records of children between the ages of 7 and 12 who had suffered various medical problems as a result of playing Pocket Monsters Red and Green versions. Some records are listed below, with the full listing in Appendix A. It should be noted that entries in the appendix also include symptoms born not from the Lavender Town tone, an audio phenomenon, but from the so-called White Hand Sprite, Ghost Animation, and Buried Alive model, all of which were visual phenomena that provoked similar but distinct symptoms. April 12th, 1998. Obstructive sleep apnea, severe migraines, autorrhagia, tinnitus. May 23rd, 1996. General irritability, insomnia, addiction to video games, nosebleeds, developed into violent streaks against others and eventually himself. April 27th, 1996. Cluster headaches, irritability, eventually took mixed painkillers. March 4th, 1996. Migraines, sluggish and slow behaviour, unresponsiveness, developed into deafness and went missing. Body discovered beside road. April 20th, 1996. The document that was circulated internally was the first that these incidents had been connected with the Pocket Monsters video games. Until then, the cause had not been discovered or diagnosed by medical professionals. Indeed, it is uncertain how the company themselves managed to find the cases related to the event without seeking advice from health services. Pathology detail, Lavender Town tone. The predominant symptoms related to what would become known as the Lavender Town tone included headaches and migraines, bleeding from eyes and ears, mood swings and irritability, addiction to the games, unprovoked violence, withdrawal and unresponsiveness, and in approximately 67% of cases, suicidal tendencies. However, these symptoms only manifested in children between the ages of 7 and 12 years old who had reached the area in the game known as Lavender Town, most of whom were revealed to have been wearing headphones or earphones while playing the game. As it turns out, the developers of the Lavender Town area had sought to make an area that would leave a lasting impression on the player, according to Seki Uchitada, who was a member of the development team. Seki claimed that at the time of development, a number of the team were interested in making Lavender Town a little different from the rest of the game. The Pokémon Tower is a visible result of that, Seki told Games Dimensions magazine in an interview earlier this year. That, and the fact that Lavender Town is so different from all the other cities in the game. It is smaller, it has fewer people occupying it, it didn't have a gym, and, of course, the music was very, very eerie. In fact, in the first version of the game, we were told to slightly change the song played in the background of Lavender Town, because our manager told us it would make children upset. The music used in subsequent versions is different. Either Seki was unaware of the full impact of the Lavender Town tone, or was vastly understated how upset children would get. No more is said of the music in the article, but there are mentions of Lavender Town's other macabre features. See below. What Seki failed to disclose to Game Dimensions magazine was that the music used in the first wave release of Pocket Monsters Red and Green was formulated out of an experiment in binaural beats, using slightly different frequencies of sound. Each frequency played in one ear through earphones or headphones, various psychological effects can be induced upon the listener. In most versions of the first wave releases, this resulted in the player feeling uneasy, apprehensive, and mildly disturbed. However, for upwards of 200 children, it provoked a variety of disturbances in the brain that went undetected, purely because it was undetectable by fully developed human ears. Instead, only children fell victim to the tones, resulting in psychological and physiological problems that in some cases led to death. Pathology detail. Visual overview. These visual effects are known among programming circles as the white hand sprite, the ghost animation, and the buried alive model. Each has been found to cause headaches, nausea, and in severe cases, hemorrhaging of the brain and lungs. While around 70% of Lavender Town Syndrome, LTS, is due to the lavender tone, the remaining percentage is split among those visual phenomena. It is partly due to the visual stimuli occurring after the player is introduced to the lavender tone. It has been theorized that those unaffected by the aural stimulation, such as the deaf or hard of hearing, make up the remaining 30%. While viewing these models can cause these effects, there are certain methods that allow a viewer to safely examine them in detail. The White Hand Sprite. Known in the code as whitehand.gif, it was scripted to appear as a Pokémon on the 3rd floor of the Lavender Tower. It is divided into 4 separate animations: an introduction, the cry a Pokémon unleashes before a battle, an idle, and 2 attacks. These attacks are unknown, as they are listed simply as Fist and Brutal. While viewing the animation has been proven to be hazardous, viewing the frames of the model has been proven to have no adverse effects. The white hand is depicted as a shriveled, slightly decayed hand, with surprising attention to detail. Flesh is peeled back from the bone, and several tendons dangle realistically out of the wrist. The first attack is the hand balling into a fist, then swinging forward. However, the brutal animation is missing several frames. The hand seems to open up, then cuts out. After a few seconds, it reappears, closed again. No record has been found of these missing frames. Note: this sprite is mentioned by the girl next to the Pokémon Tower when you hit no to her question if you think ghosts exist. She says, "Ha ha ha ha, I guess not. The white hand on your shoulder, it's not real, but is simply a hoax. It never actually existed." Ghost animation. The ghost animation, coded as haunting.swf, was intended to be placed in several areas throughout the tower, including in the centre of a path on the 2nd floor. However, players cannot interact with it, leaving many to believe it was intended as a background feature. The ghost animation, as well, must be viewed in individual frames. It is comprised of 59 frames total. However, after extraction, around half of these frames have been revealed to be the standard ghost model used in Pocket Monsters. Around a quarter of the remaining frames are comprised of static to produce a fading effect. However, interspersed with these bursts of static are several frames of screaming faces, along with images of a skeletal man in a cloak, hypothesized to be the Grim Reaper, and several killed corpses. The meaning behind these are unknown. While under oath before the video game's commission board, lead programmer Hisashi Sogabe testified as to having no knowledge as to where these images surfaced. Out of all the phenomena associated with LTS, this animation is the most speculated on. In his thesis, Video Games and the Manipulation of the Human Mind, viewable in Appendix C. Dr. Jackson Turner argued that the images were intentionally placed in, due to their brief time appearance on the screen, and to the graphic nature of the frames. Turner theorized that these were meant to subliminally influence players into becoming more frightened by the disturbing surroundings. The buried alive model. Often referred to as its code, the Berryman script, the buried alive model was to be found on the final story of the Pokémon Tower, in what has now been replaced with the Marowak ghost. According to the scripts assigned to it, the buried alive model was intended to be the boss of the tower. Once reaching the top floor, the following conversation would have taken place. Buried alive. You're here. I'm trapped. And I'm lonely. So very lonely. Won't you join me? After this, the battle would have been initiated. Once in battle view, the buried alive model appears to be a decaying human corpse attempting to crawl out of the ground. It has been programmed to have 2 white hands, a Gengar and a Muk. Strangely enough, a protocol for the buried alive's sections after it was defeated were not written. In the case of the player defeating him, the game would freeze. However, a specific ending was written by an unknown programmer upon losing the battle. In this ending, the buried alive was to have stated, "Finally, fresh meat," followed by several lines of gibberish. He was to have then dragged the player's character into the ground surrounding him. The scene would finish with a typical game over screen. However, in the background, an image of the buried alive character devouring the player was to have been shown. Especially strange are the protocols for after this scene. The cartridge was to download this image to the small internal memory contained in the Game Boy, overwriting the title screen that normally accompanies a Game Boy turning on. Instead, whenever it was started, the player would view this image as the sound file staticmesh.wav was played. The intended purpose for this effect, unlike many of the other factors leading towards LTS, is unknown. Author's note. Everything listed here is completely true, all from official findings. Earlier, I also found other information regarding the makers of the sound files, but I can't find it anywhere. I searched around multiple Google pages, forums, and even my browser history, and the information is nowhere to be found. If anyone was able to find information regarding the Pokémon Green or Red versions before recall in Japan, please let me know, so I may be able to tell the world. This video was made possible by the generous support of my patrons. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye.